Welcome to another episode of Game of Life with Dan and Harmon. It's just Dan here today. I'm so thrilled to be joined by two musical theatre superstars. Billy and Peter, welcome to the show. Both currently in Sunset Boulevard. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having us.
Now, I feel like I have to do a little bit more mental gymnastics in my head when I have more than one person on the show. But I did a whole run of episodes with most of the cast from Groundhog Day and had multiple people on during that time, and I had great fun doing it because I love the dynamics. First of all, how's Sunset Boulevard going?
I mean, it has been so surreal and like fantastic, really. It's been a fun journey so far, getting to, I think Tim said it, like, creating a new version of the show and Sarah Brightman. And for me personally, being my second show that I've done and like
it's your second show.
Yeah, so second big show to do and meeting people like Billy and like everyone in the cast. It's just been so, I'm just grateful. And it's been, even with the reduced shows, it's been an amazing reception so far.
Yeah, likewise. I think this company is just like so incredibly talented, from our creative team to the artists performing on stage each night. And yeah, it's been a real rewarding process for me. I came to the party like a little bit late in rehearsals, and everyone was just so giving and so accommodating to get me up to speed, but then to also be able to put my own stamp on what we were doing on stage has been a real joy, like a real treasure as an artist to come into a production like this that's new and exciting, and a production that hasn't been done a lot in this country at all. Like the last main stage, like big scale production that happened with this was back in 1997 with Deb and Hugh Jackman. So to have the opportunity to do such a rare piece with this incredibly talented cast and the ability to work with not one but two beautiful Norma Desmonds as well, it's been really cool.
I had not heard of the show before. It sort of came to Melbourne, and I had a lot of fun with it. It's quite a sweet, I would describe it as a sweeping show. It really just washed over you. So much so, I'm seeing it again in a week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
It was a great show. Billy, is this your, how many shows are you up to now?
A couple. I
did West Side Story just before.
Did West Side Story. That's why I was late to the party with Sunset. So I was forever thankful to Opera Australia for the chance to be able to do both, which was amazing. But it meant zooming into rehearsals for Sunset during the day, and then going off to Sydney Harbour and doing West Side at night, and then flying down every other weekend to do some intensive rehearsals, and then flying back to Sydney to do a show week. But incredibly grateful to the company for just that opportunity and I guess the logistics of organising me doing both at the same time. But did West Side, Miss Saigon before that, a little show called The Happy Prince, which was David Young's little baby up in Brisbane towards the start of year before last. Then we have a big jump to sort of pre-COVID when I did Book of Mormon. And then prior to Book of Mormon was Les Mis and Pirates of Penzance. So I've racked up a couple now to the point where I'm probably no longer considered quote unquote young or fresh to the industry, which stings a little sometimes. But no, thrilled to be back on stage after COVID in this production as well.
I did not realise you did Book of Mormon.
Book of Mormon, yes. So I joined end of Melbourne. So I didn't actually perform at the Princess Theatre. That's where I learnt the show. Yes. So Sunset was my first time treading the boards on the Princess Theatre. But joined at the end of Melbourne and the full Sydney season, and I think my count in the end was about 748 Book of Mormons, which wasn't quite as many as Morgan, who you had on the other week. He started as a swing on that production, but then moved into a full-time track as well. Yes. But I think he clocked over 1,000 by the end.
Whoa, wow, that is. Can you even imagine in your head doing that many shows, Peter?
I think I only racked up about like 200 or so at Rouge, and even that was like, I think my ensemble track was manageable for me. But I was like, I hope to get there one day, because I've been surrounded by so many people like Billy and stuff who've done more than 500 shows, and I've just I want to get to that point. So it's kind of inspiring in a way to be like, okay, I think if they can do it, I think I can do it too. But at this moment of time, I'm like, I hope I get that opportunity. But it's crazy to me doing that show after hearing how hard it is and stuff. I'm like, oh, wow. So I hope I get there. But yeah, right now I'm just like grateful just to perform every night, that we get to. So I'm just like one step at a time. I'm not thinking about getting to 1,000 performances. I'm like, just be grateful for the week of shows you get to do. And hopefully in a few years' time, I get to be like, I did this show, 10,000 times, whatever, what I mean? But yeah, no, I haven't really thought about it that much.
So you're relatively fresh to this, industry, I suppose, in doing shows.
Yeah.
What was your first professional, show like?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, getting that first professional gig was like, I was so lucky to get it. It was like, I remember having a music call with Stephen Amos, and I asked, like, my mom always goes, so why did you get the job, compared to that other person? I was like, you just I got the job because I'm, but I went, why did I get the job? And like the way he explained it was just a lot of things coming together at the right time. Like this person didn't want to step back into this, and the character needed to be this, and the ensemble track is this, and you just fit it, and you're good. And I went, oh, okay. But what was it like? It was daunting. It was scary coming in. I had to go back home to Perth, and like watching cover rehearsals for the first time was like, whoa, this is the professional industry. You're allowed to have fun. You're allowed to be yourself. But, when the MD or the choreographer is like, all right, let's go. Everyone snaps into it. And you're like, okay, this is the level I need to be at now. And then I was surrounded by, like on this show in Sunset, I was surrounded by so many great role models.
Yes.
People that I looked up to, like, Simon Burke, Bert Labonte, Adam John Fiorentino, James Bryce, and all these kind of people that showed me the kind of performer I want to be eventually. I have a goal of being, a leading man in Australia one day. And I think I've got so many role models in my life now that I go, okay, that's the kind of person I want to be like. So again, it was a great learning experience, and I absorbed so much. Like the first few months was just like, be quiet and absorb. You're new, you're fresh, just learn. Just take everything you can. And then as I got comfortable with the show, and now on Sunset, I'm able to like be myself more and explore more who I am as an artist. But yeah, that experience was like unforgettable. And even then I still think about it, that it's only been like 2 years since I finished. And I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It just feels like yesterday I finished at Whopper, and I was like, auditioning for all the shows. But now it's like, yeah, it's been 2 years you've been working. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. That's weird. I'm still a baby. I don't know much. And then people go, what advice would you give? I'm like, I am not qualified to answer that question.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah, I'm not there yet. I'm like, not there yet. I was like, oh, maybe you are. But, I'm super grateful for that experience. That was like, I learned a lot. Yeah.
When you get into, a theatre for the first time on that first job, is there, a sensory overload for both of you at first?
I think my experience is somewhat similar to Peter's. My first professional production, like big scale tour, was Les Mis, and I was also
that's a big one,
a replacement for someone who had the role
that
as
was
well.
An experience in itself.
Yeah. So yeah, when you're getting put in, I guess Simon Burke spoke about this a couple of weeks ago about being put into The Wizard in Wicked. It's kind of cool to have that condensed rehearsal period that is very focused on you. But that does like ramp up the pressure as well.
Yeah.
And then you're coming into an established cast who've been working together for, in both of our cases, a number of years, and learning to navigate not only socially with those colleagues, but artistically on stage as well, what their expectations are from the previous performer, and then you having the ability to bring something new to that as well. So it can be quite a confronting space when you first step into that. But by the same token, that's very much underpinned by the sheer joy of this thing that you've wanted for so long has finally come about, and the real sense of responsibility that you have to yourself to put your best foot forward and to do a really good job. But at the same time, just like sort of open your eyes and pause for a second and go, wow, like 10-year-old Billy is peaking right now over this opportunity. So that was the real reward that came against, I guess, the pressure and the unique challenges of stepping into an established cast.
Do you ever get used to knowing that there'll be thousands of people in the audience watching you?
I forget sometimes, I think. Peter and I, we have a moment, a few moments in Act 2 where we move a couple of tables for what we call the typewriter scenes in Sunset Boulevard. And I quite often, I'm pulling the table off one night and I'm a bit in my head, like we talk about the fourth wall in theatre, and quite often that wall for me, like the audience doesn't exist. I'm there to do my job and tell this story. And a few moments I've caught myself, I look out and I'm like, oh yeah, there's like 1,300 people out there
like
watching me do this.
We're setting a desk and I'm still, giggling at the joke that Billy has just made. And I'm like, don't tell anyone. I'm like, he. And I'm like, oh, hello, 2,000 people. Going off stage now. Focus on Tim, not me. I find it, I don't know. I think it's different when you're on the ensemble and when you're doing your cover, in my case, like the cover track and stuff. But I find it very relaxing after a while to know that the audience is there. Like, the anticipation of the audience, it's building, it's bubbling. Oh my God. And then as soon as I step on stage, I go,
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is on some levels just the lights shining. It is just a dark void. But I'm the kind of person that really likes to look at the audience and see like, okay, what am I looking at here? But I find it very relaxing, and no, every day it's like, oh wow, these people will remember the show, or they'll remember something I did, hopefully. But yeah, again, it's just so lucky. Just like, wow.
I guess the other thing too is maybe a lot of audiences don't realize the amount we can see and the amount we can hear. And from our point of view as well, that every audience is a unique sort of organism where they react slightly differently to jokes that are said the identical same way every night, or slightly differently to something really shocking or surprising that happens every night. Every audience, depending on whether it's a Tuesday night or a Saturday matinee or a Saturday evening or a Friday night when everyone's just knocked off of work, every audience is just slightly different. They all sort of live in the same sort of reactive world, but they're a bit unique. And some nights we'll go back to, oh wow, really good crowd tonight. Like, oh, they're a bit more quiet, they're a bit more invested, so it's a real sort of reward hearing the differences, I guess, in audiences every night. But yes, a lot of people aren't quite aware of how much we do see and how much we do hear. The person in the 20th row opening a lozenge, we can hear you.
Like the person sleeping in the third row, I see you. Yeah. I'm watching you right now. I'm looking at you.
I think one of my favorite reactions was one night, I think it was Sylv was on, and she'd finished a really big note, and after this big note, there's a like a hushed bit of silence in as if we never said goodbye, and you just hear this person from like way up the back of the theater because it's quite live. You just hear this. Wow. And I struggle because we're in a freeze and I'm not allowed to react in that moment, just struggling to hold my laughter but glad to know they're enjoying it just as much as we are.
Something I've sort of realized over the course of doing this podcast with other musical theatre people is that there's a whole show happening backstage as well that people would not be aware of. What is that sort of backstage, atmosphere like during a show? So there's lots happening.
Tight.
Quick changes.
Choreographed to the minute details of it. I didn't realize how, actually it does take a bit of time. That's why you have tech, and that's why you have the previews. Yes, it's for the show itself, but it's also for the backstage, because for the crew and for the dresses and stuff. It's not just us on stage, it's everyone backstage working out quick changes, because we have desks and a lot of props and there's not a lot of room backstage. It's like, okay, so the desks have to come here and then you run through and then you change and wait and then this and that. It's like, like a football match. It's just like there's a lot of tactics involved about, where you go, where do you need to change and all that stuff. And I
think, there's a choreographed show behind the show. Yeah. Basically, particularly the opening 13 minutes of our production, we kind of call lunch, which is Let's Do Lunch, this big ensemble number. And it's chaos on stage, but it's chaos off stage as well. There's props going everywhere. But we've now got down to a fine art of literally, I know that I can make my cue if you go first and you need to make your cue, because it's quite tight backstage. Some avenues walkways where you go through, there's only enough room for one person. So you'll come off stage, quickly get in front of someone else, and then you'll hold and someone else will come in front of you, and then you get to go. It's like this traffic that is just so much. And now it's muscle memory now. We don't even think about it. You just do it. But figuring all that out in tech is a bit of a process. But I think a lot of people don't quite realize there is usually almost just as many people backstage running the show as there is performers on stage. And in smaller productions like four-hander plays, there's usually more people running the show than there are actors on stage. So it's a full scale production, and it's something that I've thought about at length, and usually our wonderful technical crew and dressers and sound people and our stage management team aren't looking for the spotlight, but I would love them at the end of the show to come out and bow with us, because it's a real team effort. But a lot of those people love doing theatre, but they also love the performers being in the spotlight and them helping. They're not looking to come out and find the spotlight at the end of the show.
I think you really hit on something there. I mean, like I think as audience members, we don't appreciate that there's a whole team backstage making sure the show happens.
Yeah. And even on something like Sunset, our wonderful set and the set piece that is this gigantic Norma Desmond mansion that I'm not going to spoil it, but does some pretty amazing things throughout the show. It's almost like it's a character of the show in and of itself. That was built in London by a full team and a team of designers and engineers and builders to physically put this gigantic set together. You know, and sure, they get mentioned in the program and stuff, but I'm like, what we are able to do is dependent on people like that. So yeah, I guess it's this huge beast of a production takes so many more elements than just the performers on stage.
And I think the greatest thing about it is like everyone is, you know, you hear that saying, it's like, to have a long career, just be a nice person. Everyone backstage is a nice person, and it's they're all wonderful people. And like, there's a few of like Nat, who does her sound, Deputy Head Mech, Ash, like who've worked on like, say, Rouge, and then like, oh, we're working together again. And you have that rapport again, and you get to work with these great people. And I think that just also enhances the environment that you're in. You know, everyone gets along. Everyone is so grateful to be there, loves the job, and loves the thrill of theater.
Right.
And I don't know, I just like making new friends and stuff. And these are the people that I get to work with and have friends. You know, you're not going to forget this. You know, so, you know, like one of the dresses, Andrew, on the show, he doesn't dress me or Billy, but like he's one of the dresses, and he's such a lovely guy. And I love getting to know him and all that stuff. And we found out like he was a dresser. His first job was Sunset Boulevard back in 1997, 6.
That's like a full circle moment.
You know what I mean? For him, and you're just learning about that history and of people, and you're like, this is so cool. It's like, where have you worked? Oh, I've worked on this show since this and that. I've worked on Potter for all this, and you get to hear stories and get to know people, and it's just like brilliant. And I think, yeah, as Billy said, they should get as much recognition as we do, because they're just amazing people. Yeah.
When I had Ashley Rubinak on, when I was doing my Groundhog Day series, something she mentioned, which I did not realize this, but when a show travels, the set travels too. But also the floor as well travels. And I did not, it's something you wouldn't even realize. Like, oh, they take the floor as well? That's crazy.
Yeah. So quite often in a theatre, for example, like the Princess has a stage level wooden floor. But quite often for speakers that we hide in the floor for performers to be able to hear their fold back, to automation tracks, to little holes to drop pins in for set pieces and all that kind of stuff. The theatres typically don't like you tearing up their permanent floor to do that. So what shows will often do is create a raised floor, either from anywhere from sort of 10 to 15, 20 centimeters above, and they can hide all of those things underneath. And that floor then gets traveled to every city, which is great for us, because usually the only thing that'll change is like the depth of the stage or the slight width of the stage. But all of your little glow tape marks that are on the stage that you've got to find in a moment of darkness or whatever, usually are within a pretty similar position. Whereas if they had to be at the mercy of supporting beams and all that kind of stuff under stage, it'd have to dramatically change on every city.
And what's really cool is I was watching Ash, one of the deputy mechs, and he was on his computer. Everything is measured to the, like, they will take a photo and then they will, like, you know, line it up with a box and stuff, and there's all the measurements of like the lights and the stuff. Like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm measuring for the transfer to this. So like when Rouge when we go back to Melbourne, and I was like, what do you like, the lights has to be, you know, this far apart, and like
it's so meticulous.
Everything's
Everything's
very
so meticulous.
and it's like, oh, they're already prepping, you know, for Sydney, and we're like, oh, so we don't leave for another 2 months, right? It's like, yeah, but we need to start doing this now.
We need to start getting the theatre ready.
Yeah, we need to start getting the theatre ready and like breaking everything down. So it's like, it's the fine art of that. And I was like, okay, you do that. I'm going to do the easy stuff and just pretend, go have fun on stage, you know, and they're doing the hard yards of like,
So the show is going to the Sydney Opera House. Will that be your first time, Peter, doing the Sydney Opera House? I know Billy, you just did Sydney on the Harbour.
I did Sydney on the Harbour with the Opera House in the background, and then last year I was privileged enough to be with Miss Saigon in at the Opera House.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited to go back there. It's one of my favourite places to perform.
Yeah.
Is it a daunting thing knowing that you're going to perform at the Sydney Opera House because it's so iconic?
Yeah, I think I remember my first day walking in, and it was a real. I got quite emotional walking into that building because you grow up. It's one of the things you learned about in primary school about the Harbour Bridge, and then you've got the Rock in the centre of Australia, and then you've got the Opera House. Like there's these wonders of Australia that everyone knows, whether you're Australian or you're from overseas. It's one of the most recognisable theatres in the world. If you showed someone on the other side of the world a photo of the Opera House, they'd probably be able to tell you what it is and where it is. So to have the significance of that and the history of all the other amazing performers that have sung and performed in those walls previously, it was a real highlight of my year last year, and quite hard to control my emotions scanning into stage door.
Yeah. I've never really been to Sydney. Besides, I've only been to Sydney for like a costume fitting, but it was like go costume fitting, leave. So I've never really been to Sydney, been to the city, explored it. So I'm very excited about that. But as Billy said, it's the Opera House. It's the landmark of the arts here in Australia. So when just like we're going to the Opera House, I was like, yeah,
it doesn't sound real.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. And for me personally, I get as emotional because I think about my whole arc of doing this as a career. Really, I only decided to do this in 2015, or I can't remember whether that was year 10 or year 11 of when I went, I want to go to WAPA and pursue this as a career. It's been like less than 10 years, and I'm at the Opera House.
Yeah.
You're joking.
Yeah.
So it's like, what? Are you kidding me? So and you see photos and people like Billy who's worked there before. It's like, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. And it's just like, and I look at the photos and I go, that's where I get to call. That's where I'm working.
I'm working there.
That's work.
Get to go to work.
Yeah. And it's like, yes, there is pressure there, but there's also just kind of just like excitement. I think the excitement overrides the pressure, the anxiety that you have inside. I think it's just like, let's go to work, So yeah.
Billy, having performed at the Sydney Opera House, do you think the first sort of few performances you were there affected your performance?
Oh yeah, big time. I was in Miss Saigon, which is a tragedy tale. There are some light, funny moments in Saigon, but it's not anything goes. Put it that way. Yeah. But I couldn't stop smiling, even through the tech process and putting the show in, because thankfully with Opera Australia they've got a very close relationship with the Opera House. So we got the show into the theatre quite early before we opened. So we had sort of a bit of time for it to sink in before we got our first audience. But still, looking out on the Opera House with a packed crowd and doing the show, I couldn't help but smile. Like I said before, the child within me that just dreamed of doing theatre one day. Not only was I so happy to have fulfilled those goals, but at the same time, you are just so incredibly grateful for that space that you're in.
But what was it like doing Chris? Because that's iconic.
I got to sneak in. I covered Chris in Miss Saigon, and I got to sneak in just before we left Sydney. I snuck in my Chris debut on the Opera House stage, and I'll never forget being in the wings. So after the show finishes, I was in the wings waiting to come on and bow and just fighting tears. The little kid within me that dreamed of just doing theatre one day, let alone portraying a lead role on the Opera House stage, was like, it overwhelmed me.
Yeah.
And yeah, the significance of that was not lost on me, and it's still not lost on me. I get butterflies thinking about the fact that we're going back there, just due to the significance of the building.
Have there been moments for either of you where you've had interactions with fans at the stage door that seemed somewhat overwhelming?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Let me ponder.
I think my first experience of fans at stage door was Les Mis, and those big epic shows that have been running for years, and Moulin Rouge will definitely be another one.
Yeah, for sure.
Wicked, Phantom, West Side Story.
Yeah.
They all have a following of these fans who not only love the shows but love the writers of the shows. So they quite often see the full suite of whatever that writer has done. They'll go and watch, and Yeah, overwhelming. I think the Philippines was overwhelming for me in Les Mis with the level of support that we had from the fans over there. It was like we were rock stars. And I'm like Billy in the ensemble. Like I'm not out the front with my name up in lights, you know. I'm just happy to be there doing the show. But they wanted autographs and they wanted your picture and they knew things about you and they'd researched you through your social media and everything, which was wonderful. But similarly in Australia, particularly on Book of Mormon, because we were in the show for so long, we developed relationships with some of these fans that would just want to come to stage door to support you, and some of them made fan art and
that was a thing where I was like, oh, but I'm just in the ensemble. Why? What? You know, they give the ensemble, the covers, so much recognition and love as much as the leads as well.
Yeah.
They're so, as Billy said, they're so supportive in that sense. And again, it was like I had to get used to that because, you know, after the show, I'm just leaving, I'm going home. But, you know, they'd stop you and go, hey, Peter, we made you something.
Right.
Or, you know, like this bracelet, this picture of you, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, this is unbelievable, you know. And again, because it's such a big show, you know, some of these fans have been you know, when I joined Rouge, some of these fans have been following it since day dot,
Right.
and they again are so supportive of me coming into the show, and they're like, oh, we can't wait for you to make your debut as Lautrec and all these kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, the funny interactions has always been like, can I have a hug? You know, I was like, oh yeah, of course, you know, and all this kind of stuff. You know, it's just like the impact that we have on their lives is something that cannot be understated.
Right.
But again, it's so like weird. You know, I was like, I'm just a music theater performer, but these people come and watch the show and they love the show, and you know, and they get so much joy out of it. And
it's something I've sort of discovered over and over again doing this podcast, talking to people from the musical theatre world is, you know, people get gifts, you know, and people get drawings of themselves, which I didn't realize. You know, when I saw Groundhog Day and decided, oh, that show really impacted me in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I thought I want to have as many of the cast members on the podcast as I possibly can. It was great. It was one of the best things still I've done on the podcast. And, you know, I had started getting fans of that show because there's a dedicated fan base to that show that I did not realize before. But it's so wonderful to sort of really shine a spotlight on the ensemble and swings and everything like that. I think it's so important to acknowledge what they do because it is a very hard job.
Yeah, and I think to touch on that and expand on that fan experience, for me, being Asian and a person of color, you know, I mean, there's talks about representation. At the end of the day, for me, I just want to bring joy and like a smile to a person's face. That's why I work hard in the show, because someone has spent money to come and see the show. I want to make sure that they have a great experience. And if I can, you know, if they look at me and go, wow, he's really good, that's great. But, you know, the other night at Sunset, this like Asian girl and little Asian boy came up to me and said, can you sign the program? And I was like, oh yeah, of course. And I think it was the little boy, I can't remember his name, I'm so sorry, but he played Tam in Miss Saigon. And the mom came up.
I think.
Yeah. And the mom came up to me and she said, oh, this is Tam. You know, he played Tam in Miss Saigon. I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's wonderful. And I looked at him. I was like, we're going to be on stage one day together, buddy. And he was like, yeah. You know, he nodded and was very excited. And the mom looked at me and was like, it's very nice to see someone that looks like my children up on stage.
Oh, what a moment.
And, you know, my friends overheard that. And I was like, yeah, of course. You know, and I think I get emotional when I think about that because, you know, he looked kind of like when I was a kid, and I was like, you know, I've achieved something that I didn't set out to. Well, maybe I did, but you know, I wasn't thinking about that. And then I was like, oh no, I do have an impact on representation, and that's why I need to work hard and be the representation I never had. And and it's just amazing the impact that you can have on someone's life, even in the ensemble.
When that happens to you, do you ever sort of start to feel the pressure then of having to sort of live up to that?
A little, of course. I mean, but that's natural to anybody, you know. So, you know, of course I feel that pressure, but then again, I feel that honor to be there, you know. And again, as I said, I'm the kind of person that takes motivation from it, and I'm inspired by it. So I go, okay, if that person thinks of that of me, I've got to keep going. I've got to keep working hard and work my way up to eventually, you know, I hope to be like Billy here, who's, you know, covered, you know, who's played and covered iconic roles from Chris, Tony, Joe Gillis. You know, I hope to get there one day and be the representation I never had. But yeah, so of course, but again, you kind of just go, you know, hard work, you know.
just on Book of Mormon. So I was one of the fans that sort of lined up for hours on end to get some of the cheap tickets for opening night.
Yeah, and they used to hand out donuts to everyone who lined up overnight around the clock.
Yes.
I think they used to do it was like a $20 rush.
Yeah, $20. It was $20
so if
rush,
you lined up, they'd give out $20 tickets to whoever came for one whole performance, and they'd pack it out. And it was always the loudest show that we did in each city, and it was it was a promotional tool to help open the show. And they hand out maple glazed donuts, as they says in the show, to like the first 150 people in the line or whatever it was. And I remember they queued up so far around Sydney. It was the longest queue they'd had. And they queued up. They started queuing up at like 4 p.m. the day before. So the box office opened at like 9 a.m. and there was people who camped out overnight to get these tickets. Like insane.
I think here in Melbourne, when there was that line for opening night, I thought I'll just show up early in the morning at 6 a.m. or something like that. And I got there and the line was already, around the block. Like they'd been camping overnight.
Yeah, I think it sort of crossed Little Burke and then went around the corner down Lonsdale Street. Crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. So I had Ryan Bondi on the podcast recently, who's planning to come back to Australia actually, and he took a picture of the fans lining up, and it was just such a moment for me, being such a musical theatre fan, then to have someone on the podcast who I lined up to get tickets for the show that he was in. Yeah. It's sort of a moment that I sort of pinch myself every now and again.
So did you get a donut?
Yeah, I did.
Was it a good donut?
I can't remember. I think it was okay.
After being in the line for that long, I think
anything would have been
sustenance would have been good.
You're like, oh,
that's it.
That's amazing.
But yeah, Book of Mormon, it was such a unique beast, and it's so great that it's making its return next year, because it's I found working on the production, it was something that theatrical people and people that love music theatre love, but it also had the ability to access an audience, whether it be from South Park or people who've just heard how raucous and irreverent and funny the show was, that drew them in to come and see some theatre. And hopefully that new audience that got access saw that and went, I really enjoyed that. Maybe next time that there's something on here that I think I might like, I'll book a ticket and go along. So I think shows like that and jukebox musicals, whether you love or you hate them, have that ability to draw in a potentially new audience that might end up sticking around, which is awesome.
Do you think you'd be able to do that show again?
I think so. I say to people, I was as fit as I've ever been on Book of Mormon. I had a couple of kilos to lose when I got cast on Book of Mormon, but I lost about 6 kilos in my first month of rehearsals on Book of Mormon, because it's like in the ensemble, it's like a 3-hour F45 class. You jump on stage, you dance your little Mormon heart out, like so full on, and then you run off stage, you get changed quickly, and you come back and you do it again, and on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off the whole show. And some of the costumes, particularly in Act 2, can be quite challenging to dance in, so that's like another added layer to the show. I would love to do it again, but man, I'm not sure my knees will forgive me if I did another ensemble track. That show, I've heard performers on your podcast previously talk about, I'm looking forward to a little bit of a break on my body, whether it be, Simon Burke or Morgan a couple of weeks ago spoke about Moulin Rouge and his body needing a break, and I'm sure you felt that too, Peter. Yep. But Book of Mormon, when COVID shut us down when we were in New Zealand, I was not thankful for the global situation that was happening, but my body certainly enjoyed a short break after that one.
How long can you go on a break before it becomes too long?
I mean, my break between Rouge and this was about 2 months. Between Rouge and Sunset, so I can't really say I had a big break. But even then, I learned a lot about needing, still finding forms of income. I was like, I'll be fine. I'll live on my savings. And we started rehearsals. I was like, I have no money. So now I have to learn about, having a second, to do that. But that break in itself is good to let the body rest and also go back to doing singing lessons and acting lessons. But I think after a while, after like maybe a month and a half, I was like, I need to do something. I need to get back into it.
I think I've found, I feel guilty when I'm not working on something.
Yeah.
It really does get to me, like to the point where during the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, I was doing a podcast every single day. And then I got to the point where I realized I don't need to do that. I actually don't need to do that. Like I can't, it is okay to take a break every now and again.
Yeah, 100%. as I mentioned previously, I didn't quite get a break between West Side and Sunset, but I did get a short 2.5, almost 3 weeks between Miss Saigon and West Side Story. And that was really great to just sort of reset, because it's a totally different show from one to the other. To get the opportunity to reset was really cool, but also that was a break where I had work coming. So it was easy to enjoy that break. And I think the challenge for a lot of performers is this industry at the best of times can be quite uncertain. Right. And, you know, when you're on a job, it's fantastic, but you do always have in the back of that mind the end date of your current contract.
Yep.
And wondering, you know, what shows are coming, what shows out of those would I be right for? Yep. And am I going to land that show or those shows as well? So I always found when I didn't have a show lined up, closing a show was a little bit more disheartening, and you mourn it a bit harder because you know that there's a period of uncertainty of I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to get back on stage again. Yeah.
When you become comfortable in a show for a long time and you realize, there is an end date to this and I don't have anything lined up, do you feel like you have to, you know, remember how to hustle again?
Yes. No. Yeah. I mean, I think I posted on my story once about when I was doing Rouge, and I did post, I was already, like, we were in October, we finished in Feb, and I was already thinking about the end. And I had to stop myself from doing that. My girlfriend is great at calming me down and being like, you know, that's a while away. You know, it might seem very close, but it is a while away. And, you know, you do work hard. Remember, if you've got this far, you know, you've done the hustle and you will continue to do the hustle because that's who you are. But yeah, you can't bog yourself down thinking about it all the time. Yeah. Because then then you'll miss out, and then you'll finish the contract and you would have been like, how was it? You're like, oh, I was thinking about the end the entire time.
I didn't have time to enjoy it.
Yeah. I think it's just important to enjoy it at you know, balance.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a healthy balance of hustling for that next job and working really hard to put yourself in a position where you're ready for that next contract when it does arise. But yeah, allowing yourself the freedom to, like I said before, just remember that child that dreamed about this day and not take a single show for granted. I had that, like I said before, that unique opportunity at the end of Miss Saigon where I had a 2 or 3 week break coming up and then a job lined up after that. So I had a really awesome opportunity to just savor every single last performance that I had in Adelaide on Saigon. And of course they went on to do a fabulous Asia tour with some new cast members as well. So the show was continuing, but my time with it, I had time to mourn the show and mourn the friendships that I'd made there, because it's an intense environment when you jump on a production. You're a bunch of artists who are accessing real deep parts of your emotions every day for the enjoyment of thousands of people every week. So you become like family pretty quickly, and you go deep with people on your show pretty quickly, and form strong friendships that can last throughout the years or for a season as well. So it's hard when you finish a show sometimes when you're not sure if and when you're going to see or work with your colleagues again. So
speaking of former colleagues, I just had, you know, Nigel Huckle in the studio just before you came in today, and a question I sort of came up with on the spot for him, which I'll ask again to both of you. So I used to, you know, fear talking to people in a setting like this because, you know, I did speech therapy as a kid and I would always get so self-conscious whenever I talk to people. So the fact that I'm sort of here doing this right now is sort of mind-boggling to me. But it turns out the thing that I sort of feared the most, talking to people, is now the thing that I actually really love. Yeah. So I'm wondering, for like either of you, has there been something that you thought that you really, really feared, but then you did that thing and then you ended up loving it?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, you go. Let me think.
I was apprehensive to be an understudy when I first joined the industry. And that sort of terrified me, learning 2 different versions of the show. And I still don't quite know how swings in our industry learn multiple tracks, because I just don't think I'm the type of person that has that ability.
Two is enough.
They're a unique beast, and it boggles my mind how much their brain can contain. So hats off to the swings. But being an understudy was something that scared me when I first came in the industry. I thought I would revert to what I knew in my ensemble track, and and would I be able to handle, the pressure of being in a lead role. But after doing it, it's actually something I really enjoy because you get to know the show in a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
And you understand the show from a completely different angle. But yeah, in the early days, before I'd sort of popped my cherry and had a few cracks at a couple of roles, it was something that maybe not terrified me to the point where I'd, be immobilized, but it was certainly something that gave me a fair whack of anxiety. But I don't think that was helped by the fact that my debut for Marius in Les Mis in Brisbane, I'd had my tech run, or what we call a put-in. So your first full lights costume run ever in the role was in the afternoon on like a Thursday, and then I'd finished that show and I'd missed my quick change into the wedding, and I dropped a couple of lines here and there, and it was not a great afternoon for me. But the creative team had faith in me, and they said, look, Ewan's off tonight, and we're going to put you on for Marius. And at that point, I sort of had a decision to make. I was like, I can either crumble and let the fear get better of me, or I can turn this around, believe in myself and all the work I've done to get myself to this point and go out and do it. And thankfully, from memory, I went out and had a pretty good show. So
yeah, I think for me, it would be similar to Billy, but on another level. I'm a mover. I'm a strong mover. I'm never going to call myself a dancer, never in my life. And I remember I was in the dressing room at Rouge, and the Sunset dance call was coming up. And I remember I was saying to Stefan and Simon Fairweather and everyone in that dressing room, I was like, I'm freaking out. It's a dance call. It's Sophie Holloway's taking the dance call. I did Jazz 3 at the end of Whopper, which is good, but not great. I'm going to make a fool of myself. It's going to be Jazz technique. And I was terrified. Again, because again, I was comfortable in the show. I was like, I've got a show. So I was terrified. And then, I got into the room, and it was a fantastic Broadway jazz or whatever it was, routine, and doing it halfway through doing it, I was like, oh no, I trained for 4 years for this, I still know how to retain choreo and perform. And I think while I was terrified, and then, going into groups and all that stuff, I was like, can I say shit in my pants? I'm gonna say shit in my pants.
Absolutely.
But then, I think I settled into it, because then I went, as I said, I've trained. This is where I'm at. I'm a strong mover, and that's okay. And again, it was a great opportunity, because they were like, we're looking for strong movers who are actors and singers and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, that's my opportunity. I think I've always said that you can always tell I'm a mover if you put me next to a dancer, because I don't have the technique, because they've been dancing since they were like 8 or 3, and I decided I'm going to dance, like 7 years ago, you know what I mean? So that terrified me, but then I kind of went, okay, if I know where I sit in the music theater stream, and that's okay. I love being a strong mover, and and then doing Sunset, and then putting myself up for more choreo stuff. We don't dance a lot in the show, but there's been times, like, for example, the number for Ladies Paying, I said to the Ash, I was like, if you need me to do stuff, I'd love to do more. And again, I've already learned more from just doing that little bit extra choreo and stuff. And then again, same with like covering. I was like, Lautrec in Moulin Rouge was a big character to cover, and having to deal with a cane and then a French accent, all these different things just right out of uni was like mind-boggling.
Yeah, that's a massive first job.
Yeah, it was. Just to be on the set, and the lights and the arch, and like having audiences that close. And like, I was terrified. I was like, can I do this? Am I good enough? That self-doubt, I'm not good enough, and all that kind of stuff. But, again, the creative team looked after me. They looked after me, and they really nurtured that. And, and then when I made my debut, I think it was like 6 to 9 months after I had graduated. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a baby. But again, that journey in itself was getting comfortable in my ensemble track and not always thinking about going on for my cover role. You know what I mean? I was like, I want to go on. And the day I said, you know what, actually, I'm comfortable in my ensemble track, and I don't need to go on for my cover role. I'm not comfortable. Yeah. And it was a Wednesday. I remember eating breakfast, and I said to my girlfriend, I'm comfortable with never going on for my cover track. That's okay. And then the stage manager's phone number came up on my phone. I was like, hello. Hey, Mads, what's up? And she's like, you're making your debut today. And I was like, sorry? So it's like how the universe works in that way. Yeah.
What are those moments like for both of you when, friends and family come and see you perform for the very first time in a professional setting like that, and they realize, oh, okay, this isn't just a dream anymore. This is real.
I think it's really cool. I think for me, it depends on who's in. I asked my parents to always give me their honest opinion, and my parents have been incredibly supportive since I was, in amateur productions way back when as a kid, and then in through university and into the professional world. But I always ask them for their honest feedback.
Yeah.
So
Are you good at taking honest feedback?
Usually, yeah. Thankfully, the honest feedback's been pretty kind as of late. But yeah, my parents are always overly supportive. So when they're in, I try and make sure everything's as clean and sharp and precise as I can be. But if I've got friends from like childhood days in amateur theatre and people who've supported me along the way, like this is, it's just been such a village effort from my days doing amateur theatre in Canberra to coming into the professional world. There's been so many people who I owe a vast portion of my success to, and I really enjoy performing for those people because I hope that I can show them a glimmer of them in my story and the key roles that they played in getting me to that point. So when they come to stage door and say, "Oh my gosh, the show is fantastic, you're amazing," like this and the other, you go, "Yeah, but it couldn't have happened without you."
Yeah.
So it's almost like my thank you to them is performing well and just stewarding what they've given me.
Yeah. I think when it's like a teacher, when it's my friends, like our jazz 3 dance teacher came and saw Rouge, and my high school friends came and see Rouge, and I was arts captain in year 12, and then like the year 7 arts rep at the time, she came to see now she's all grown up and she's in university. She came and saw the show. She's like, "You were the arts captain," and I was like, "Oh my god, you were in year 7 when I, oh my god, what the hell? You're in uni now?" But same as Billy, I enjoy performing for them, but then as soon as my mom and dad get there, I get instantly terrified.
Yeah.
It's the honest criticism again.
Take picture. Wow, he's on stage.
Do you sort of do you know beforehand where they're going to be sitting in the theatre?
I make sure to know where they're sitting because I want to know where my mother is sitting. Like in the I love that we had a pre-show in Rouge so that I would walk out and I would be able to find them. I'm like, "There's my mom and dad." But I get emotional when mom and dad are there. I think at the end of the day, we just want to make our parents proud, and that's kind of all I've ever wanted to do. So I remember in Rouge, I nearly teared up at the end because we're singing that emotional song. What's it called? "Come What May" or whatever. Yeah. And I was in the aisle singing, and I kind of like looked to my left, and my mom was like right there, and I nearly made eye contact with her, and I nearly started bawling my eyes out. But yeah, I think, again, they're just so proud, and from where I started to where I've come, and I think every time they're in the audience, I just kind of like. And especially for my dad. My dad and I have been on this journey from, him telling me, "Do not do this," to now he's like one of the biggest supporters of me and like that journey in itself. And just when he gets to see me on stage, it's like, "I told you I could do this, Dad." And I hope you're proud of me. That's how I kind of view it. So, yeah.
So was performing for both of you always in your sights when you were younger, or was that something you sort of found later in life? I mean, Peter, you mentioned you wanted to do it when you were, 15?
Yeah, I found it. I said, because my dad migrated from Singapore to Perth, I came out of my shell, as I said multiple times to people, but no, I think I wanted to be a pilot at one point when I was a kid. I wanted to be a garbage man for some reason because they were like cool, at one point. But I think I wanted to be a pilot like my dad. I wanted to be a lawyer. But it's not until you really grow up and I tried different things when I left high school. I tried law for a semester, and I pictured myself in 10 years' time in a cubicle, miserable in my life. And I was like, "I'm not doing this." And then I did a drama class, and I went, "This is where I'm meant to be." Yeah. So no, it was never really in my life, but I've been performing all my life. I've realized I'm like my dad. I'd like to make people laugh or be silly and be a goofball. So yeah, it's been in my life. It's always been there, but I think I didn't really realize it until later on in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the cool thing is, as actors, it's a similar story for a lot of actors who thought they wanted to do like a bunch of different things, and now we just get to play pretend and do all of those things on stage. For me, I saw, and it's great that's coming back next year. Love it or hate it, I have a soft spot for Annie the musical. It was the first musical I saw at the tender age of about 3 or 4. And my mum said to me, I don't remember this, but my mum said to me at interval when the curtains closed and they all disappeared, I started crying because I wanted them to come back. And my mum couldn't quite communicate to me that's like, oh, we're just taking a break. They are coming back.
Right.
And then the same thing happened at the end of the show. I was really upset that this like thing that I'd been spellbound for a couple of hours had ended. The lights, the world that they'd created on stage, the singing, the dancing. And I think from that point, that sort of planted the seed. But it wasn't until I was a bit older, I got to sort of mid-upper primary years where I started singing in school choir, and then I did the odd sort of amateur theatre production and realised I had a bit of a knack and a likening to this thing called theatre and musicals. And then from there, just kept sort of doing shows for fun. And then I remember having a conversation with Stephen Pike, my theatrical mentor, about age 16, and he said, I believe in you. I believe you can do this. But as an ex-professional himself, he said, you can make it in this industry, but you're going to have to work hard. And if you want to do that, I can help you do that. And I made a decision that day to chase theatre, and thankfully it all turned out. You know, it's a hard industry to crack into. There are many people who have a very similar story to us that aren't fortunate enough to crack it into the professional game. So
it's like, I've always said, it's like I was watching this video about Mark Cuban, and someone asked him, is like, if you're a billionaire, could you do it again kind of vibe? And he was like, any billionaire who says they can do it again is lying, because it's all about luck and opportunity. And I kind of was like, in terms of where I'm at my career, it is about luck and opportunity. Like, who knew that Rouge was going to be casting, that Sunset was going to be coming around? You know, it is about that hard work. You have to work hard for it, but it is, again, that luck and opportunity of the shows coming around. But yeah, similar to Billy, it's like, I just giggled because I went, in primary school, I was in the choir. When we got to high school, I was doing all the plays. I was arts captain every year. Yeah. What else would I have done with my life? And no, I wanted to be a pilot. I was like, no.
Garbage man.
Yeah, I was like, garbage man, pilot. I was like, you were doing theater your whole primary school and high school life. What else would you have done?
All signs were leading to the same thing. Yeah.
So I just giggled at that because I was like, I was doing singing lessons every year, and I was like, what else would I be doing? Idiot.
I really like asking this question, and maybe you've already touched on it before earlier. But has there been a negative story that you've told yourselves over the course of your careers so far that you've had to actively counteract with a positive story?
Yeah, I think for me it came in breaks between contracts, and the two big ones that I can think of is after Les Mis, I came back from the Asia tour after the Australian tour, and came back to Australia and got married and a few other things. But I had a sizable 4 or 5 month break off stage, which the early part I really enjoyed, but towards the latter part when I really had that desire to get back on stage, that was really hard. And I had this voice in the back of my head going, are you going to be like the one show wonder, like the kid that came out of university and had all the promise and everyone was looking to do great things. You did one show and then you're never heard from again. Right. And that plagued me pretty badly until I eventually booked Book of Mormon. And then when COVID shut everything down, similarly, 18 to 24 months ago, when auditions had come back after COVID and the industry was starting to find its feet again, but I was, struggling to get callbacks, so I wasn't particularly right for something, or I thought I'd be perfect for such and such a role, and I didn't even get an in-the-room audition, and those sort of haunts and those negative thoughts came back. And thankfully, I think by that point, I hit a bit of a, people say you hit rock bottom. It was more like a splat for me. Yeah. But I got to a point where I went, right, I know I can do this. I've proven to it previously. I just need to sort of pull my socks up and get to work and get on it. And thankfully, since taking that attitude and I guess changing that rhetoric, like you said, has led to the last 12, 18 months where I've been incredibly fortunate to do the shows that I've done. Yeah.
Probably for me, it goes back to what I was saying about being a mover and a dancer. I think a lot of the times when we finished, there was the rhetoric of the shows that are coming, you need to be a strong dancer in order to book a gig, because that's all the graduates that who got gigs after uni straight up were great dancers and great performers. Not to say they weren't great actors and singers, I'm not saying that, but they were great dancers as well. So that's why they got this gig and that gig as soon as they finished. So I was like, I'm not going to get a gig. And when we graduated, I was fortunate enough to auditioned for all the big musicals that were happening at the time. It was Mamma Mia, Hamilton, Miss Saigon, Beauty and the Beast. I can't remember there was another one that I'm missing probably, but like all these big major auditions and going into the, we're fresh-faced graduates. So the first thing we do is dance.
Yeah.
And you're in the room with people who've done Chicago and American in Paris. And you're like, oh my God, what am I doing in here?
Yeah.
So that, he's like, yeah, shit, it's like getting that out of your head and like, again, as well, being a person of color and also being like, you have to work hard, 10 times as harder to prove that you can be in the room as well. And again, just getting rid of all that and just be like, focus on the stuff that you're good at. And I told this story before, but I think all those negative thoughts kind of went away when I auditioned for Beauty and the Beast. And I kind of went, oh, so this is where I sit in this theme. Right. They were like, can he come in and sing first? And I sang first. And I'm like, wow, you're great. He can really sing. And then they said, can you do the Beast material? And I did the Beast material. Like, oh my God, wow, he's great. And then I did the dance call and I went, oh, they're all wearing ballet tights and, the tight ballet stuff. And I'm in my jazz pants and ballet shoes or my jazz shoes. And, it's a technical dance. And I went, oh, okay. And they went, thanks, but it's okay. Yeah. So I went, okay, so I am a good singer and actor. I'm a mover and that's okay. But I have my strengths and I have my weaknesses, and this show is just not for me right now. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I kind of like discovered that. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with being a strong mover. You know what I mean? Like, I think you put yourself down because you're a mover. How dare you? And it's like, no, that's great. Be grateful for that. That's your, that's your thing, and just, getting rid of all that negative thought. I'm just a positive person in general. So I think it's like, there's no point in trying to bug yourself down for something you can't control.
Of course. Yeah. I think that's really key. Like just realizing, this is going to be out of my control sometimes. Like sometimes I can't help it.
Yeah. I think that was it. It was like, I can't help it. Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I think something that helps combat both of those situations is something you touched on earlier, Peter, which is when you are in these spaces to just continue being a sponge. And I know you said that because you felt new to the industry and fresh, and you're just like, all right, I want to absorb and learn as much as I can. But I, thank the Lord, I'm in my 10th year in the industry this year, and I'm still trying to be that sponge every day, because there's both of these situations we've just described aren't new problems for performers. They've been dealing with this forever.
Everyone's dealing with
something. And there are so many performers, brilliant performers that have gone before us who've had, everything from dry spells to learning their strengths and weaknesses. And I usually find hearing from them and some of the experiences that they shared, like it's super, super valuable advice. And really, really good ways of managing both of those situations. Yeah.
It's an interesting topic that's come up on the podcast before when I've talked to musical theatre performers is, people who are now in their sort of late 30s are starting to sort of question where they fit in the grand scheme of things. Like, do I want to keep being an ensemble member? Do I want to keep doing, swings? Where do I fit in the grand scheme of things? Yeah. Do you feel like when you get to a certain age, I mean, as ridiculous as it sounds, because, late 30s is still young, but you're still kind of in that no man's land of, okay, well, where do I fit? Is that something you feel like you're going to have to address at some stage?
Yeah, I think for me, it comes back to the availability of work in Australia. Fortunate enough to do Miss Saigon last year as an ensemble cover, and then I landed my first sort of big lead role with Tony and West Side Story on the Harbour. And then a few people did ask me the question after I did Tony. They're like, oh, are you going to go back to like ensemble work now? And I was like, absolutely. For me, it's a question of, would I rather be outside of theatre waiting for another lead role to present itself, or would I rather be on stage doing what I love every day and continuing to learn, hone my skills, and have fantastic opportunities like I have on Sunset Boulevard? So yeah, I think for me, if I was in potentially an overseas market where you could do 6 auditions a week, it might be a different feeling. But I think staying in the Australian market, you don't exactly have the luxury of, if you want to work theatre year round, or as long as the year as you can, you don't quite have that luxury of too much choice in that regard, or a lot of like control over that as to what you would go for or what you would get seen for. Yeah. For me, I get to live my dream just doing theatre every day. It's, obviously there's goals and things that I want to work towards and hit certain lead roles and all those sorts of things. But for me, the real joy and the real privilege is to walk into work at a stage door every day. And, occasionally that stage door is the Sydney Opera House, as we said before.
I don't think I can answer that. I mean, because I'm only 24, turning 25. But of course, I've thought about it.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I do have as I said, I do want to become a leading man one day. But at the same time, it's also that thing that I think we were talking about it once. It's like, well, if I'm in the industry as long as I hope to be, and I get to a certain point where I go, no, I just want to be playing leading roles. I think we were talking about, I will probably have to accept the fact that maybe some years I won't be working if that's my mindset.
Right.
And I was like, but I want to keep performing and, doing what I'm doing now, being on ensemble cover is still a great, to be saying I'm still an actor, I'm working. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Because again, I don't know what shows are going to happen in 5 years' time. Because my friend was like, where do you see your career in 5 years? I was like, I don't know. What shows are coming in 5 years?
Yeah.
You can't,
Do you know something?
Do you know something that I don't? So I don't know. I really don't know. Will I be working next year? I don't know. Like what shows are going to be coming? What opportunities will be there? I don't know. I can only hope that I'm this and that. But at this time, I think I'm still young, one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Just get the next show.
Take it one day at a time.
Take it one day at a time, and that's kind of where I'm sitting right now. It's like just one day at a time, next show, what's next,
Something that really delights me, having done podcasts with people from the theatre industry here in Australia, is realising how close the community is here. Because it is like a smaller sort of pool here compared to somewhere like the UK or the US.
Yeah.
And that it makes me happy because, having one foot in the comedy world every now and again, the comedy community here is very close as well.
Yeah.
So, what is that sort of world like for you to sort of be in that close-knit, ever-evolving family?
I think it's great. I think our industry as a whole is quite tight-knit.
Yeah.
From, like Peter said before, like working with crew who you've done other shows with, or performers that you haven't performed with in years, like Nigel, who you had on earlier today. We worked together on Les Mis years ago, and it was such a treat to be finally back on stage together in Miss Saigon. And I've had that with Dean Vince on Sunset Boulevard and a host of other performers throughout the years where you've spent time on other shows and then come back to work with each other again. And that's a really unique experience. But it's like 6 degrees of separation is more like 2 in our industry. Like if you meet someone in this industry you've never met before, I can guarantee you, if you've done a show or two, you're probably going to have above 50 or 60 mutual friends on Facebook.
Yeah.
So
You share a room with Dean Vince, and every 5 seconds it's like a new person. It's like, oh, I worked with them on this show. You're like, huh? What do you mean?
These seasoned performers that have CVs as long as your arm have worked with pretty much everyone in the industry. And it's so cool just to hear, some of the stories and tales from shows of yesteryear, but also them to be just as excited to be working with a brand new cast member on a new show.
Yeah. And I think it goes into the same with like creatives that you see in the room. And at least I've discovered this, like the casting directors and producers, you get to know them, not know them personally, but when you walk into the room, it's like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Like, I remember you from this and that. And because of that tight community, I think it's like once you break into that industry, it's so good to know that they're human too, and they want you to succeed like everybody else. But it was like that was the very interesting thing for me, at least, doing like all these auditions and being like, oh, it's you again. You know what I mean? They're like, hello, Peter. And I'm like, hello. How are you? Yes. You're going to make me try and sing that song again? They're like, yes. I was like, okay, great. But it's been like so cool to see. I think that's one of the coolest things, to see how tight-knit and how, again, 2 degrees of separation, it is. And it's, again, that's an opportunity in itself as well. Networking, we always hear about in our industry. I hate networking at like opening night parties and stuff. I get very anxious in those things, but because it's so tight knit and stuff, it's easier in that way because people remember you from this and that, and it's just like that's cool.
Do you think either of you have ever been guilty of falling into that trap where you think, why did they get that over me? Why?
Oh, I think every performer has been through that trope many a time. Really? Him?
No.
Him over me?
I've never been angry. No.
Yeah. No, I think every performer, because they just have such a desire to do well, and everyone, because, you know, artistry is so subjective, everyone has their own unique take on how a role should be done or sung.
Yeah.
But ultimately it's whatever the creative team's looking for. And I've had the unique experience of being on the other side of the casting desk sometimes as well, and it's interesting to see some of the reasons that like people don't get cast. Like if there's a prearranged cast member for one role, looks wise they might not work, or height wise they might not work, or even vocal type they might not work. They're like, oh man, he was fantastic. Like he would have been so good, but like we've already got this arrangement here. So there's a whole plethora of different reasons. And as easy as it is to sit there and whinge as best you can, or try not to fall into that that trap, because it is a trap, and you'll end up spiraling yourself out of control and talking yourself out of all the hard work you've done. Yeah.
I think for me, at least, in all the auditions I've done, the feedback I've gotten has kind of always been like, oh yeah, I know that. You know, it's always been like, his dance is not as what we need for the show. And you go, oh, okay. You know, so I think, again, most of the times I have had reasons, but when the times that I don't, and you go, why didn't I get it? I think self-reflection is a very important thing as well, for me at least. Yeah. And I can look back and go, oh, okay, I think these are the reasons why I didn't get the job, but also it's out of my, as Billy said, I don't know the reasons. I don't know, you know, I don't know what they're thinking, you know, and there's no point in me trying to figure out what they're thinking. I didn't get it. That's fine, you know. Get over it, you know. So I think that
something that someone brought up before on this podcast is, like a reason you may not get a role is you may be going in to cover multiple roles. You may be right for one of those, but not right for the other two that you have to cover as well. It's such a jigsaw puzzle that they're trying to piece together in the room there.
I think the hard part too is the waiting. The waiting after auditions is like every day your anxiety just goes like a little step higher, going, did I get it? Did I get it? Did I get it? Is no news good news? Oh, some people have gotten no's, but I haven't gotten a no yet. And there's all this chatter going around the industry. Oh, so-and-so we think's got this role and so-and-so's got this role. And you're just like, it's a lot of the times it's quite unhelpful to have those thoughts.
Like how many times have you refreshed your emails today?
At least six. At least six. 10. And every time your agent calls, you kind of stare at the phone and go, like, is this the call I've been waiting for? Or is this like, hey, we need you to update your headshots?
And they're like, hey, how you doing? You're like, why?
Good. Tell me why you've called. Oh, no, we're just checking in. You're like, damn it. But I think that's, and again, I think it comes back to there's just, there are more performers than there are jobs in this country, and the competition is fierce, which means that the quality is really, really great. So it's great for audiences to have such healthy competition for all of these, the few jobs that are going. But by the same token, it means that, you know, some performers are going to get work, and at points other performers are going to miss out, and that's an ever present challenge to face as a performer who is lucky enough to be working, but also knows that not every job lasts forever, and you know there is an end date on your contract, and preparing yourself for that is super important.
When I go out and see comedy, it's a part of me where I can't sort of switch off that brain, because I used to, having done stand-up comedy years ago and writing for friends here and there, I can't switch off that brain when I go and see a show. Just that brain, like, it's just not picking apart, but like over analyzing everything. Like, oh, I wish I could have crafted that, joke in that way they did. When you go and see shows yourselves, are you able to switch off that performer brain?
Yes, I think in a little bit. It depends. If I didn't get that show and I'm watching it, I'm going to be bitter. I'm watching, I'm like, I could have done that better. No, I think I'm able to switch off because, again, it's just like, as Billy said, there's more performers than our jobs. And again, as the person that I am, I'm just like, I'll be happy for you to get that job. But then most of the time you watch it and you go, I can't do that. I can't do that. Well done. So I think I am but it differs time to time. It depends. It depends on the mood, it depends how you're feeling and all that kind of stuff. But I think it is important to switch off because you got to celebrate everyone who's working,
right?
Because it is such a tight knit community,
Mm.
and yeah.
I find when the quality of the production is really high and I can escape into the story, that's when I love going to watch theatre. But I'm sure, like yourself, sometimes it is hard to not dissect everything. It'd be like a surgeon watch someone else do surgery.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And they'd be going, oh, I wouldn't have made that incision there, or I wouldn't have stitched it up like that. So there's always that creative analytical brain that's happening. And the other thing that pulls me out of it is when your friends are on stage and like
you can't see them as the character, you just see them as your friend.
Correct. You know, like if you've had one too many nights out on the town with them, it's hard to look at them with the same eyes to see the story they're telling. But at the same time, you watch the show from a different lens where you're just so, like Peter said, so overjoyed for them to see them in their element and see them doing what they love and the joy that brings them the same joy as well. But yeah, I found the last show I saw did that for me, which was Groundhog Day. So during rehearsals for Sunset, I was lucky enough to catch a quick performance of Groundhog while I was down here, and I escaped completely into that show. It was fantastic, and had multiple friends and acquaintances that I knew in that production that I would see for about half a second. I go, oh, that's Connor, or oh, that's Kate Yaxley, or but only about half a second, and then boom, I was back into the story, and I was just lost in the world. So I find really great theatre, I find it easy to escape. But yeah, sometimes when you see people or see a production that potentially could have been done a little bit better, it's hard not to be analytical.
Because when I saw Groundhog Day, I went specifically to see one of my classmates who's a swing. His name's Matt Hurrigan, and him being on stage and seeing them on stage, I was like, oh, they're great. That's fantastic. And I just, again, as Billy said, you just feel so happy, and then you snap back into like, this is such a great story, and it's a plus that my friend is also on stage, getting to live their life in this wonderful show.
I've had 17 cast members from that show on the podcast.
Wow.
Including colleagues Ash Rubenak and Benjamin Colley.
Yeah. I mean, and Madison as
Madison
well.
was great. Yeah, great.
In the process of trying to round out that cast and get the rest of them on before the end of the year. Man, this has been a wonderful chatting with you today. I'll start to wrap up. What I know, sort of one of the things I've sort of learnt through doing this podcast is, ambitions change, and there are layers to the things that you want to do. So for the longest time, I thought I wanted to do stand-up comedy, and then that changed quickly into writing, knowing that I was having difficulty performing because I would get too nervous.
Yeah.
And then even doing this podcast, the first year was all about me trying to figure out how to be comfortable in a setting like this, talking to people. And then, the second year now, learning to do it again without a co-host, and then also being comfortable with it, but also now really focusing in on the quality of the conversation, just making sure it's engaging, and it's like, so just sort of, knowing that there are layers to these things, and it does take time to build up, in whatever it is you're doing. Yeah. So I guess for the both of you, like, do you sort of realize that as well? Like, maybe I'm not here vocally, maybe I can't quite crack that yet. Do you realize that there are, that it does take patience to get what you want to do next?
Yeah, I would say so. I think one of my goals eventually would be to direct something. Yeah. I think going back to watching something with an analytical brain, I'd love the opportunity to have a go on the other side of the creative, I guess, boundary, and be in the stalls, hopefully giving direction as opposed to being on stage. But I'm acutely aware that there's an incredibly big skills gap between my current directing skills and the skills of a director. And I think some of that will naturally come as my career progresses, but something I probably also want to chase off stage in terms of upskilling and learning, and potentially even just sitting with a director on a production and being that sponge in the room, absorbing and learning, and then figuring out my own style of doing that. So yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from in terms of your abilities needing to meet where your goals are at and your aspirations are at, and that's a ever evolving thing. Like I had dreams of being a producer one day, and then I've been on a couple of shows where fiscally things haven't been amazing, and I'm like, maybe I don't want to be a producer. I don't really feel like remortgaging my house and hoping that the tickets sell. So, as you go along and get more experience, I think your focus in your goals and aspirations narrows in kind of a good way, and then you've just got to make sure that your experience level and your skill level is meeting that.
I think sorry, my brain. Yes, it is ever evolving and ever changing, but again, as I think I'm a very, when I have a goal, I have the goal, and but I also understand it's going to take time to be a quote unquote leading man. So I understand, I think, in terms of just having these 2 jobs already, that I still have a lot more years of being in the ensemble, but also as being a cover. And as you said, getting those skills up, because, you need to build that experience and portfolio, so, for example, like I hope so in a few years, I hope to become like a supporting character. And then in a few more years after that, I hope to become those kind of things. It's going to be the small steps, but at the same time, improving my skills at the same time. And, for example, watching Sylvie Palladino, a vocal masterclass. I'm not there at all yet.
I don't think anyone is.
No one can. But I have so much more to learn, so much more to do in order to become a leading man. So I've got to hustle and work hard at that, but it's going to take time.
Right.
I think I go back to, there was a song I did in Diploma in 2019 when I started, training at Whopper. And that song was so hard at the time. And then we get to 4 years later, and I went back. I went, oh, that song. And I went to sing it again. And I went, oh, that's slightly easier now. Because I have the technique and the experience now to know what I need to do. So I think similarly, I think it goes similarly to my career. If I want to be that supporting character, I've got a few more years to, get my craft and my skills honed in, before I can, do that. So yeah, it is ever evolving. It's ever changing. And it's like, you've got to keep yourself in check, and once in a while, I think. And I think that's literally it.
I will ask one last question. It's the question I always end on. What are the words of wisdom you live by?
What are the words of wisdom that
that's a bomb to drop. I think one for me is probably like try to enjoy each day. Don't take yourself too seriously. Like, it's important to work hard and pull your socks up when you need to, but not at the expense of enjoying life. And I think people say life is short, but it's the longest thing that anyone ever does. But I think constantly trying to move forward, but not at the expense of enjoying where you're at right now.
I think I heard the quote on Ted Lasso, the TV series, and I've lived by it ever since. Be curious, not judgmental.
Walt Whitman.
Walt Whitman. Be curious, not judgmental. Luck is when hard work meets opportunity. So just keep working hard, and when the opportunity comes, grab it with both hands. I think those are the 2 I live by. And at the end of the day, just be a good person. Just be a good person. Mom and Dad brought you up to be a good person. Do it. So those are the things that I try and live by every day, and fingers crossed. Works.
Peter and Billy, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you
today.
so much for having us.
So much for having us.
Fun.
It's been an absolute pleasure.